My parents forbade me from ever entering their bedroom. I finally broke in, and I think the knocking I've heard my whole life was my sister, asking me to kill her. Every family has its rules. No shoes on the carpet. No dessert before dinner. No staying up past midnight on school nights. Ours had all of those, and one more that sat like a quiet heartbeat beneath every conversation, a rule no one ever questioned, not even once. Never go into Mom and Dad's bedroom. It wasn't one of those casual rules parents give when they want privacy. It was law, the kind that didn't need to be spoken anymore because the punishment for breaking it was already burned into memory. I don't remember the first time I heard it. I just remember the tone. My father, Charles Ward, didn't shout. He didn't have to. His voice could cut through steel when he wanted to. My mother, Marianne, would just look away when he spoke of it, as if even hearing him say the words made her skin crawl. And so I learned young. That door at the end of the hallway, the one that never opened, wasn't just a door. It was a line. The first time I heard the knocking, I was 7. It was winter. One of those nights when the power flickered and the world outside seemed smaller. I'd gone to the bathroom in the middle of the night, padding barefoot down the hall, when I heard it. Soft and slow, coming from behind their locked door. Thump! Thump! Thump. At first I thought it was pipes. The old house made strange sounds, especially when the wind pressed against the siding. But this was different. It was steady, almost rhythmic. Too deliberate to be the house settling. I stood there for a long time, holding my breath, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Then the sound stopped, as if it had noticed me listening. I ran back to my room and hid under the blankets, telling myself I'd imagined it. But after that night, I couldn't pass that door without feeling my skin tighten. My parents' bedroom was always locked. Always. It wasn't even one of those casual privacy locks you could pop open with a bobby pin. It was a solid brass lock that clicked with finality every night. Even when I was sick, even when I cried out for Mom after a nightmare, she wouldn't open it. She'd call through the door, her voice muffled and strangely calm. "Go back to bed, sweetheart. I'm right here." I wanted to believe her, but sometimes her voice didn't sound like hers at all. Sometimes it came a second late, like someone whispering words they'd just learned. I was a curious kid. Too curious, my father would say. Sometimes, when they were out of the house, I'd test the handle. Once or twice, I even found it unlocked. Those moments felt like miracles. My heart would race, my hands sweating as I turned the knob and stepped inside. The air was always cooler in there, as if the room existed a few degrees removed from the rest of the house. The curtains were heavy, drawn tight, and the faint smell of lavender hung in the air, mingling with something sharper, something metallic. My mother's vanity sat near the window, her perfume bottles lined like tiny glass soldiers. The bed was perfectly made, the comforter smooth and unwrinkled. Everything was ordinary, too ordinary, except for the sound. The closer I got to the far wall, the clearer it became. Thump, 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 like a slow heartbeat. It came from behind the tall oak wardrobe that stood there, an antique too big for the space. I remember pressing my ear to the wall beside it, holding my breath. The sound was soft but certain, alive. Every time I went in, I got caught. It was uncanny, as if my mother had some invisible string tied to that door. I'd barely crossed the threshold before I'd hear her footsteps racing down the hallway. She'd grab me by the shoulders, her face pale, her eyes wide and wet with panic. "Ethan, what did I tell you?" she'd whisper, voice trembling. "You can't be in here." I'd stammer out apologies, too confused to understand why she looked so terrified. I expected anger. What I got instead was fear. That made it worse. The punishments were never loud. My father didn't believe in yelling. He'd sit me down in the living room, the tick of the grandfather clock filling the silence. "Some doors are not meant to be opened," he'd say. "When you learn to respect that, you'll be ready to be your own man." I'd nod, tears in my eyes, too scared to ask what he meant. When he finished, he'd look toward the hallway, toward that locked door, and something unreadable would cross his face, a mixture of grief and defiance. He never went into the room when I was awake. He and my mother would disappear behind it every night, closing it with a click that sounded heavier than any lock should. By the time I turned 15, I'd grown used to the knocking. It came and went, sometimes for days, sometimes only once a week. I told myself it was just old plumbing, an illusion born of childhood imagination. I almost believed that, until the night it happened again. It was summer, late, the air thick and hot. I couldn't sleep, so I got up for a glass of water. As I passed their door, I heard it. Faint at first, then sharper, as if something behind that wall was aware of me. Thump! 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 I froze. Then, against every instinct in my body, I knocked back. Just once. The sound stopped. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, thump, thump, thump. I ran back to my room and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. At breakfast, I asked, "Why can't I ever go in your room?" I said. "And what's that sound I hear sometimes?" The silence that followed was worse than any yelling could have been. My mother's spoon froze in her cereal. My father set his newspaper down slowly and looked at me. There was no anger in his eyes this time, just exhaustion. "There is no sound," he said quietly. "I've heard it for years," I said. "It's not in my head." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Drop it, Ethan. I won't tell you again." "But—" He slammed his hand on the table, the silverware jumping. My mother flinched. "Enough!" His voice was low, sharp as glass. "You think you want to know what's in there, but you don't. Some truths will ruin you." I didn't say another word. But that sentence, "some truths will ruin you," stuck to me like a curse. From then on, my mother spent more and more time behind that door. She'd disappear for hours, sometimes the whole afternoon. I'd knock, ask if she was okay, and she'd answer in a soft voice that never quite sounded like her own. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Don't worry." Occasionally, I'd hear her humming a melody, low, tuneless, and strange. Other times, I'd catch her whispering, as if having a conversation with someone else in there. I told myself she was praying. But praying to who? Years passed. I went to community college, got a job at a small mechanics shop, started saving for my own place. I spent less time at home, but every night I returned, the house felt heavier. The knocking never stopped. It grew slower, weaker, but more deliberate. Like something or someone was waiting for me to answer. When I turned 21, I finally had enough saved to move out. A tiny apartment across town. I told my parents at dinner. My mother smiled, the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. My father nodded once, muttering, "It's time." There was relief in his tone, not pride, as if he'd been waiting for me to leave. That should have been enough to make me let it go. But instead, it lit a fire in me. I couldn't leave that house without knowing. Whatever secret they'd buried behind that door had haunted me my whole life. It was like a shadow attached to my name, and I couldn't start a new life carrying it. The night before my move, I packed my things, folded the last of my clothes, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The house was silent. My parents were asleep, or at least I hoped they were. I waited until the clock struck 3 before I got up. The hallway stretched before me, dark and endless. At the far end, their door stood closed, the brass knob catching a glint of moonlight. I walked slowly, each step heavier than the last. When I reached the kitchen, I went straight for the top shelf, the old porcelain cookie jar shaped like a cat. That was where my mother kept spare keys. My fingers brushed something cold and metallic inside. The key. I held it in my palm, heart pounding so hard I thought it might wake them. I made my way back to the hallway. My hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click. The door creaked open, and a draft of cold air spilled out. The room was dim, the curtains drawn tight. The scent of lavender and cedarwood hanging heavy in the air. Everything was neat, untouched, perfect. And yet it felt wrong, like the air itself was holding its breath. I stepped inside. The sound came immediately. Thump, thump, thump. I froze. My skin prickled. It was louder than ever before, and it was coming from behind the wardrobe. I moved closer, each step slower than the last. My reflection in the wardrobe's glossy wood looked pale and distant. "Hello?" I whispered. The knocking stopped. For a moment, the silence felt like a scream. Then, from behind the wall, something answered. "Help!" A woman's voice. Thin, dry, barely a whisper. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Who's there?" I whispered. Silence. Then again, "Help me." I staggered back, tripping over the edge of the rug. My breath came fast and shallow. Every rational thought screamed at me to leave, to lock the door, to run, but my feet stayed rooted. Because deep down, beneath the terror, there was something else. Recognition. That voice. It sounded familiar. I didn't know how. After that night, the voice became a wound that wouldn't close. Every sound in the house, every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the pipes, echoed back to that whisper. "Help me." I told myself it had to be a dream. I told myself I'd been half asleep, that my imagination had filled in the blanks left by silence. But the longer I stayed in that house, the more I began to notice things I hadn't before. Small things. My mother's bedroom door wasn't just locked at night anymore. It was locked during the day, too. I'd come home from work early and find her gone, the car in the driveway, her purse on the counter. The only sound in the house would be the faint hum of the refrigerator and sometimes that dull, rhythmic thump from the end of the hallway. My father had started drinking again. He tried to hide it, but I could smell the whiskey on his breath when he came home from work. He'd sit at the kitchen table with his jacket still on, staring at nothing, his glass trembling in his hand. Sometimes I'd hear him muttering to himself, half-formed words, fragments of sentences that made no sense. Once I thought I heard him say a name, Clara. The name felt like a splinter under my skin. I'd never known anyone by that name. When I asked him about it, he glared at me so sharply I felt my throat close up. "You misheard," he said. "Don't eavesdrop," but I knew I hadn't. Days passed. The silence between us grew thicker, like the air itself was weighed down by something unspoken. My mother barely looked at me anymore. She moved through the house like a ghost, pale and mechanical. The sound behind the wall grew fainter but more desperate, like the heartbeat of something that refused to die. Every night when I lay in bed, I could hear it in my head. Sometimes I'd dream of that room, the wardrobe, the cold air, the smell of lavender and dust, and I'd wake up with the echo of that voice still in my ears. Help me! It became unbearable. One night, about a week before I was supposed to move out, I decided to try again. The house was asleep, the lights off, the air heavy with that suffocating stillness that only exists at 3 in the morning. I slipped out of bed and crept down the hallway, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might wake them. The moonlight through the blinds painted silver lines across the floor. When I reached their door, I tried the handle, locked as always. I pressed my ear against it. For a moment, there was nothing. Then came the faintest sound, a sigh. Not the sigh of someone sleeping. It was longer, deeper, like air being drawn through a throat that hadn't used words in a long time. I backed away, fear prickling across my neck, and that's when I saw it. At the base of the door, where the wood met the carpet, there was something dark, a thin line of dried brownish red that could have been rust or something else. My breath caught. I crouched down, reached out a trembling hand, and touched it. It was rough and flaky, not rust. Blood. I recoiled so fast I hit the wall behind me, knocking a picture frame askew. I froze, waiting for my parents to come out, but no one stirred. My heart thudded so loudly in my chest that I could barely hear anything else. When the silence returned, I forced myself to fix the frame and retreat back to my room. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, everything looked normal again. The hallway was bright, the door spotless, as if the stain had never been there. My mother was humming softly in the kitchen, her hair pinned back, her eyes hollow but smiling. "You're up early," she said, turning to me. "Want pancakes?" Her voice was cheerful, almost too cheerful, like someone performing normalcy instead of living it. I nodded numbly. Sure. As she cooked, I watched her. Her movements were precise, mechanical. Her hands shook slightly every time she flipped a pancake. "Mom," I said, my voice tentative. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." I hesitated. "Who's Clara?" The spatula slipped from her hand. It clattered against the stove, the sound sharp and sudden. For a second, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she turned to face me. Her expression was blank, but her eyes, God, her eyes, looked terrified. "Where did you hear that name?" "I heard Dad say it," I said. "He was talking to himself." She stared at me for what felt like an eternity. Then she whispered, "There's no one named Clara. Your father. He's just tired. Mom, if something's wrong, you can tell me." She slammed the spatula down on the counter, the sound making me flinch. "There's nothing wrong," she snapped. Her voice cracked on the last word. "Nothing at all." We ate in silence after that. The pancakes tasted like cardboard. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to stop thinking about the name. Clara. It rolled through my mind like a ghost, looking for a body. I didn't know who she was, but I could feel her presence in the house, in the spaces between words, in the way my parents avoided each other's eyes. I couldn't stop thinking about the blood at the door, the voice behind the wall, and the way my mother's hands trembled when I said the name. By the third night, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't leaving without knowing the truth. When morning came, I told my parents I needed to run some errands before the move. My father grunted something about responsibility, and my mother kissed my cheek, her lips cold and dry. As soon as they left for work, I grabbed my old toolbox from the garage. I wasn't just going to listen this time. I was going to see. The lock on their door wasn't ordinary. It was an antique, solid brass, heavy and old-fashioned. I could have picked it, maybe, but I didn't have to. I remembered the spare key. The ceramic rooster cookie jar in the kitchen. I reached inside, my fingers brushing against a familiar cold metal shape. When I pulled it out, I could feel the weight of every rule I was about to break. The house was silent as I walked down the hallway. Dust motes floated in the light streaming through the blinds, turning the air into something almost tangible. I slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, almost too smoothly, as if it had been waiting. The click echoed like a gunshot in the stillness. I opened the door. The scent hit me first. Not the usual lavender and cedarwood, but something heavier, something decayed. It was like walking into a memory that had been left out too long. The air was thick, hard to breathe. The curtains were drawn tight, casting the room in a dim, amber glow. The bed was perfectly made, the vanity untouched. Everything was too neat, too still. I took a step inside, my shoes sinking slightly into the thick carpet. Thump! I froze. The sound came again. Thump! Thump! It was coming from the far wall, the one behind the wardrobe. I moved closer, each step echoing louder in my head than it did on the floor. The sound grew clearer, sharper, more insistent. Thump! 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 My palms were slick with sweat. I pressed my ear to the wall, my heart hammering so fast it hurt, and then I heard it, a voice, soft, hoarse, trembling. "Please!" I stumbled back, my body numb with shock. My mind screamed that it couldn't be real. There couldn't be someone in the wall. But the voice came again, a broken whisper. "Please, help me." I looked around the room like there might be some logical explanation. Speakers, vents, anything. But there was nothing. Just the wardrobe, tall and ancient, its surface gleaming faintly in the dim light. I took a breath and gripped its edge. It didn't move easily. It scraped across the floor, groaning like an animal as I dragged it inch by inch away from the wall. Behind it, I found something I hadn't expected. A door. Small, narrow, painted the same color as the wall. Invisible unless you knew where to look. There was no keyhole, just a simple brass knob. My reflection wavered in its surface as I reached out and touched it. The metal was cold. I turned the knob. It creaked open slowly, the hinges complaining. The smell hit me like a wave, dust, wax, and something sweet and rotten like flowers left too long in stagnant water. I gagged, covering my mouth. The space beyond was dark, the only light coming from the crack in the doorway behind me. I took out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, and what it revealed made my stomach twist. It was a small room, no bigger than a closet. On one wall hung faded wallpaper with tiny stars. On the floor sat a few old toys, a stuffed bear missing one eye, a wooden block, a tiny rattle. On the opposite side was a table covered with a white lace cloth, yellowed with age. Candles of different sizes surrounded it, some new, some melted into pools of wax. And in the center of that table, resting on a silk pillow, was something small and still. It looked like a doll at first. But when I moved closer, I saw the truth. It wasn't a doll, it was a body, a baby's body, shriveled and dry, skin like parchment, tiny fingers curled into fists. Its eyes were closed, its mouth open in a silent cry. For a moment, I couldn't move. My mind refused to process what I was seeing. I staggered backward, my hand hitting the wall. My phone light trembled in my grasp. Then, faintly, from somewhere deep in that tiny room, came the sound again, thump, thump, thump. And I realized with a sickening wave of clarity that it wasn't coming from the walls. It was coming from the body. I don't remember how long I stood there. Maybe seconds, maybe minutes. The world felt detached, muffled like I was underwater. My breath came in short, panicked bursts as I stared at that tiny, mummified body. The flashlight trembled in my hand, casting jagged shadows on the walls. The thing on the pillow looked impossibly fragile, its skin like paper, its mouth frozen mid-scream. But the sound I'd heard, that steady, deliberate thump, still echoed faintly in the air. My mind rejected it. It couldn't be real. It had to be something mechanical, some twisted trick of the house. I told myself that as I stumbled backward into the bedroom, desperate to put distance between myself and whatever that thing was. My heart hammered so loudly it drowned out everything else. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the silence that followed was worse than the knocking. I needed to leave, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I turned toward the door and froze. My mother stood in the doorway. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, her hair disheveled as if she'd been sleeping for days instead of hours. She looked at me, then at the open space behind the wardrobe. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then quietly, in a voice that didn't sound like hers, she said, "What did you do?" I didn't mean to," I stammered, my throat dry. "Mom, there's something in there, a body. A baby, she moved so fast it startled me." In 2 steps, she was in front of me, her hand clamped over my mouth. Her fingers were ice cold, trembling against my skin. "Don't," she hissed. "Don't say it out loud." Her voice cracked and her eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, please. You weren't supposed to see." I pulled away, my voice shaking. "See what, Mom?" "What is it? Who is it?" She turned toward the small door, her shoulders shaking. For a long time, she didn't answer. Then she whispered, "Her name was Clara." The name hit me like a blow. Clara. The same name I'd heard my father mumble. The same one my mother had denied existed. "She was your sister," she said. "You were too young to remember." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. "My sister?" "She died," my mother whispered, "when she was just a baby. They said there was nothing they could do. Charles, your father, he couldn't accept it. He said there were—" "Other ways, other ways?" I repeated, the words dry in my mouth. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He found a book. I don't know where it came from. Old handwritten, bound in leather. He said it contained ancient rites, ways to bind the soul to the body. He told me he could bring her back." My hands were shaking. "And you let him?" Her expression twisted into something between guilt and horror. "I was grieving." I wasn't thinking. "I just wanted to see her again. To hold her again." She pressed a hand to her chest. "He told me it would only take one ritual, one prayer. But when we finished, the candles went out and the air went cold, and that's when we heard it." "The knocking," I said, barely breathing. She nodded. At first it was faint, then stronger. It was her, trapped, alive, but not. The spell went wrong. She came back, but only halfway. My skin crawled. I couldn't look at her. "And you just left her there? Behind the wall?" My mother sank to her knees, sobbing. "We couldn't undo it. We tried. God knows we tried. But she wouldn't stop knocking. If we left the door open, she'd whisper all night, begging, screaming, so we sealed it. Charles said we had to keep her there, or she'd bring the curse into the rest of the house. He told me it was mercy. Mercy?" I shouted. My voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. "You imprisoned her." She covered her face with both hands, shaking. "I know," she whispered. "I know what we did. Every day I hear her voice, Ethan. Every night I see her in my dreams. We thought we could control it, but the moment you opened that door..." She looked up at me then, her eyes wild and glistening. "She knows." Before I could ask what she meant, the lights flickered. The air changed, thicker, colder, heavier. Somewhere deep in the house, a low, resonant sound began to hum, like a vibration crawling through the walls. The candles in the hidden rooms sputtered to life on their own, tiny flames flickering in unison. The smell of wax and something sickly sweet filled the air. My mother gasped, covering her mouth. "She's awake," she whispered. The thumping returned, louder now. The walls trembled. I felt it in my bones. Thump, thump, thump. Each hit came faster, stronger, until it felt like the room itself was breathing. My mother grabbed my arm. "You have to go," she said. "Please, Ethan, go. I can't just leave you. She wants you," she interrupted, voice trembling. "You opened the door. You touched her world. She'll follow you if you don't leave now." "I'm not leaving without you," I shouted. The floor shook beneath us. The wardrobe groaned, scraping forward as if being pushed from behind. My mother screamed, pulling me toward the hallway. The air was freezing now, every breath turning to mist. As we stumbled out of the room, the door slammed behind us with a deafening crack. My mother clutched her chest, wheezing as if something inside her was tearing apart. "She's stronger," she gasped. "The older we get, the stronger she becomes. That's why your father wanted you out. He thought if you left, she couldn't reach you?" "What about him?" I demanded. She shook her head, tears falling freely. "He doesn't sleep anymore. He spends every night in the basement trying to find another way. But there isn't one. The house, this curse, it's feeding on us." I felt sick. Everything I'd ever believed about my family, every normal memory was unraveling. "Mom," I said, voice breaking, "you can't live like this. You have to let her go." She looked at me, eyes hollow. "You think I haven't tried? She's not just trapped. She's bound to us. If she dies again, so do we." The words hit me like ice water. "What? She's part of us now," my mother whispered. "Our blood keeps her here. That's why the knocking never stops. It's her heartbeat and ours." Before I could respond, the front door opened. My father's heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. My mother stiffened. "He can't see you," she said quickly. "Go to your room." "Please, before I what?" His voice cut through the air like a blade. He stood at the end of the hallway, tall and unmoving, his face shadowed. In his right hand, he held a leather-bound book so old it looked ready to crumble. His eyes met mine, and for the first time in my life, I saw something close to madness there. "I told you not to go in that room," he said. "Dad," I said, trying to steady my voice. "What's in there? It's not human." He laughed softly, bitterly. "Not anymore, but she was once. She's your sister. Our Clara. You can't keep her like that," I said. "It's cruel." His jaw tightened. "It's necessary. She's suffering." He stepped forward, the book pressed to his chest. "You don't understand. The world doesn't work the way you think it does, Ethan. There are things older than God, things that offer power for a price. I paid that price for her, for your mother, for you." I shook my head, backing away. "You didn't save her. You made her a prisoner. She's alive," he shouted. "Do you know what it means to bring back life, to defy death itself?" "She's not alive," I whispered. "She's begging to die." Something flickered in his eyes then, grief maybe, or the faint glimmer of doubt. He looked toward the bedroom door where faint scratching sounds had started again. His voice softened. "You weren't supposed to see. You weren't supposed to know." "Then why tell me now?" I asked. He looked down at the book in his hands, his knuckles white. "Because it's too late." The walls groaned, the sound vibrating through the house like the growl of some unseen beast. The candles in the hidden room flared again, and a thin line of smoke began to curl from under the bedroom door. My father turned toward it, his face pale. "She's breaking through." "Dad." He didn't look back. "Take your mother and get out." I hesitated, but my mother grabbed my arm. "Go!" We stumbled down the hallway, the house trembling around us. Behind us came a sound I'll never forget, a single piercing wail that didn't belong to any living thing. The front door slammed shut on its own as if the house itself was alive. The air outside hit me like fire after the freezing cold inside. My mother collapsed on the porch, gasping for breath, tears streaking her cheeks. I turned back toward the house. The lights inside flickered, and through the window, I saw my father standing in the doorway of that cursed room, the book clutched to his chest. Then in an instant, every window in the house shattered outward, and the knocking stopped. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I've ever heard. I didn't see my father again after that night. The next morning, the police came. They found the house empty. No sign of him, no sign of my mother, no trace of the secret room behind the wall. The officers told me the structure had partially collapsed overnight. They said it must have been old wiring, a gas leak, something ordinary. But I knew better. because as I stood in the rubble, the wind howling through the broken walls, I heard it again, faint and soft, beneath my feet. Thump, thump, thump. The police never found anything. No hidden door, no small body, not even the wardrobe that had once stood against that wall. They said the floor had collapsed from termite damage, that the heat from faulty wiring had caused the scorch marks on the walls. They called it an accident, filed their reports, and left me standing in front of the house I'd once called home. The wind rattled the loose shingles on the roof, and the broken windows stared back at me like hollow eyes. I should have walked away right then, but something in me couldn't. That place still felt alive, breathing in shallow gasps, waiting for me to take one last look inside. I thought about my mother's face, her trembling hands, the way she whispered that Clara was still part of us. I thought about my father's final look, the moment his eyes met mine before the explosion of sound and glass. There had been no fear there, only acceptance, like he knew it was coming, like he'd chosen it. The house was cordoned off by yellow tape, but that didn't stop me. 2 nights later, when the police were gone and the town slept, I came back. The air was heavy with rain, thunder rumbling in the distance as if the sky itself was warning me away. The front door hung loosely on its hinges, the wood swollen and warped. I stepped inside, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the dark. The smell hit me immediately, wet wood, burnt dust, and something faintly sweet like old perfume. My shoes crunched on glass. The hallway stretched before me, half buried under debris. The photos on the wall were all gone, their frames shattered, leaving faint outlines where they'd once hung. I walked slowly, each step echoing like a heartbeat. The air grew colder as I reached the end of the hall. The door to my parents' room was still there, splintered but standing. My hand hovered over the knob, the memory of that last night flashing in my mind. My mother's scream, my father's voice shouting words in a language I didn't understand. I pushed the door open. It creaked, long and low, as if the house itself groaned in protest. The room was unrecognizable. The walls were blackened with soot, the carpet burned away in patches. The curtains were gone, the window shattered. The wardrobe had collapsed onto its side, its mirror cracked into spiderwebs of glass. I stepped over the broken pieces, shining my flashlight across the room. The air shimmered slightly like heat rising off asphalt, though the cold was biting. My breath came out in white clouds. And then, there it was, the small door. I don't know how I knew it would still be there, but I did. Somehow, despite the fire, despite the damage, that door remained untouched. The paint wasn't even scorched. It stood out against the ruin like a wound that refused to heal. My flashlight flickered as I approached. My pulse thundered in my ears. I reached out, my fingers brushing the brass handle. It was cold. Colder than ice. I turned it. The door opened. The smell hit me again, stronger this time. Dust, wax, rot, and something faintly metallic. My light shook in my hand as I stepped inside. The space looked almost exactly as it had before, though everything seemed smaller now, as if the room had shrunk. The same lace cloth covered the small table. The same melted candles surrounded it. But the silk pillow in the center was empty. She was gone. For a moment, relief flooded through me. Maybe the fire had freed her. Maybe she'd finally found peace. But then I noticed something else. Along the walls, carved deep into the plaster, were symbols. Circles intersecting lines, strange sigils that pulsed faintly when my light hit them. They weren't there before. I crouched down, tracing one with my finger. The moment I touched it, the air shifted. The room grew darker, the shadows lengthening as if the corners were swallowing the light. My ears began to ring, and beneath that high-pitched whine, I heard it, breathing. Soft, ragged, right behind me. I turned slowly, every nerve in my body screaming. At first there was nothing. Just the table, the empty pillow, the flickering light from my phone. Then I saw it, a shape in the far corner, barely visible in the dark, small, curled, shaking. My breath caught in my throat. "Clara?" I whispered before I could stop myself. The figure twitched. Then it moved. She rose from the corner slowly, joints cracking with each motion, her tiny body unfolding in unnatural ways. The light caught her face, or what was left of it. Her skin was dry and translucent, stretched thin over bone. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, the black hollow of her throat glistening faintly. Her eyes, once closed forever, were open now, empty sockets that glowed faintly from within. My body locked in place. I wanted to run, to scream, but my legs refused to move. She stepped toward me, her head jerking unnaturally with each motion, like a puppet whose strings were being pulled by invisible hands. "Help me," she whispered, the words scraping out of her like sandpaper. Tears burned my eyes. "I'm trying," I said, though I didn't know what that meant. My voice broke. "I'm sorry." Her mouth opened wider, her voice growing stronger. "It hurts." The sound filled the room, echoing from every wall, layered upon itself until it felt like the entire house was speaking through her. "It hurts. It hurts. It hurts. I didn't mean for this." She stopped abruptly, tilting her head to one side. The motion was so childlike it broke something inside me. Her voice softened to a whisper. He promised I wouldn't be alone. I shook my head. Who? Father. Her voice cracked on the word, twisting it into something barely human. He said he'd come back. I didn't know what to say. I took a step closer and her body jerked like a broken marionette. Her hand shot out impossibly fast, gripping my wrist. The touch was cold enough to burn. My vision went white. The world around me dissolved. I wasn't in the house anymore. I was in a hospital room. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. My mother was there, younger, sobbing into my father's chest. A doctor stood at the foot of the bed, his face grim. I'm sorry, he said. We did everything we could. My father's face was blank. My mother screamed, then the scene shifted. I saw them at home, in this same room, years ago. My father kneeling on the floor, drawing circles with chalk, muttering words under his breath. My mother sat nearby, holding a small, lifeless bundle in her arms. The candlelight flickered as he spoke faster, louder, the air vibrating with energy. Then the bundle twitched. My mother gasped, hope flooding her face. My father's voice broke into laughter. The candles flared and the baby screamed, but it wasn't a cry of life. It was a sound of agony. The air grew darker, heavier. My mother fell back, clutching her ears. My father shouted something, but the words twisted in his mouth, warping into sounds no human tongue should make. The baby's eyes snapped open, black and endless. The vision shattered. I collapsed to the floor of the secret room, gasping, the taste of ash in my mouth. My wrist burned where she had touched me. I looked up. She stood over me now, silent, her head tilted, her empty eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. You saw, she whispered. Now you understand. I can fix this, I said, my voice trembling. I can set you free. Her expression didn't change, but the air pulsed around her like a heartbeat. You can't free me, she said. You can only join me. The shadows around her deepened, spreading across the walls like ink in water. I scrambled backward, my hands hitting the doorframe. No, I whispered. That's not true. Father thought the same, she said. Her head turned sharply, the bones in her neck cracking. He thought the fire would stop me. My heart stuttered. The fire... She nodded slowly. He burned himself to keep me here. My flashlight flickered. Her form shimmered, breaking apart and reforming. For a moment, she looked like a child again. Soft, fragile, alive. Her eyes met mine, full of sorrow. End it, she whispered. Then the light died. The darkness swallowed everything. I couldn't see, couldn't breathe. The room filled with whispers. Her voice, my father's, my mother's, all overlapping, all begging. Help me, end it. Set us free. I reached out blindly, my fingers brushing something cold and metallic. My lighter, my hands shook as I sparked it to life, the tiny flame casting trembling light across the room. The lace cloth caught first, curling and blackening. The flames spread fast, licking up the walls, devouring the paper-thin air. Clara didn't move. She just stood there, watching me, the firelight dancing in her hollow eyes. As the smoke thickened, I heard her voice one last time, faint and distant. Thank you. Then she was gone. I stumbled out of the house as the fire roared behind me. The rain had started again, falling in heavy sheets, hissing as it met the flames. I collapsed on the front lawn, coughing, tears streaming down my face. The house burned quietly. No explosions, no collapse, just a slow, steady blaze, like a candle being allowed to die at last. When the fire trucks came, they found me sitting there, soaked and shivering, staring at the ashes. They asked what happened. I told them the truth. They didn't believe me. Maybe they shouldn't, because when the fire was finally out and the smoke cleared, the foundation of the house was all that remained. Everything else, wood, nails, brick, had turned to dust. Everything except one thing, the small door. It stood upright amid the ruin, untouched by flame, its paint unblemished, and from somewhere deep beneath the rubble, faint but certain, came the sound I thought I'd silenced forever. Thump, thump, thump. It's been 3 months since the fire. The house where I grew up is gone now, reduced to blackened soil and warped metal. The county sealed the property, claiming it was too unstable to rebuild. When I drive by, I can still smell the smoke, faint but stubborn, clinging to the air like a memory that refuses to die. They said the fire was electrical. Faulty wiring, an accident. I didn't argue. Let them believe whatever makes sense. There's no way to explain what really happened in that house. Not without sounding insane. Not without dragging the dead back into the light again. I rented a small apartment in the city. A sterile place with white walls, cheap furniture, and windows that face nothing but other windows. It's quiet here, unnaturally quiet, but at least I can breathe. I work late shifts at a gas station. Nights are easier. People ask fewer questions. Still, sometimes when it's slow, I'll catch myself staring at the reflection in the glass doors, half expecting to see my mother's pale face behind me, or the faint shimmer of those hollow eyes in the dark corner of the store. They never appear, but the feeling never leaves either. I tell myself that what happened is over. I tell myself that the fire ended it, that the knocking, the whispers, the presence behind that cursed door are gone forever. But I don't believe it. Not really. Because every night when I try to sleep, I hear it again. Faint at first, somewhere in the distance, just beyond the walls of my new apartment. Thump, 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 always 3 knocks. Always the same rhythm, and every night I lie there frozen, staring at the ceiling, waiting for it to stop. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it feels closer. I started having dreams again, too. At first, they were fragments, flashes of fire, the sound of cracking wood, my father's voice shouting in that strange, guttural tongue. But lately, the dreams are clearer. I see Clara, not as she was in that hidden room, but as a living child. Brown hair, soft eyes, a small white dress. She's standing in a field surrounded by fog, looking at me. Her mouth moves, but I can't hear her words. When I try to walk closer, she steps back, always just out of reach. And behind her, in the fog, I can see shapes moving. Not people, not animals, something else. Last night, I woke up to find my apartment door wide open. The chain was still on, but the lock was turned. I got up, checked the hallway, empty. No footprints, no sounds, just the hum of the fluorescent light above me. I closed it, locked it again, told myself I must have forgotten. But deep down, I knew better. This morning, there was a package outside my door. No return address, no name, just a small cardboard box sealed with plain brown tape. Inside was a single object, a brass key. The same shape, the same feel as the one that had opened my parents' bedroom. My hands went cold. I dropped it on the counter and stepped back, heart racing. I don't know how long I stood there staring at it, but eventually I picked it up again. The metal was warm. Too warm, as if someone had been holding it seconds before I found it. I should have thrown it away, burned it, but I didn't. I kept it. It's in my desk drawer now, wrapped in a towel. I can feel it sometimes, like it's pulsing faintly, a heartbeat made of brass. A week ago, a woman came into the gas station while I was working. Middle-aged, tired eyes, long gray coat. She paid for her coffee, then lingered, studying me with a strange intensity. "You're Charles Ward's son, aren't you?" she asked, my throat tightened. "You knew my father?" She nodded slowly. Everyone in town did. Some of us remember what he was before he changed. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "He came to me once. Wanted books, old ones, things no one should be reading. Said he needed to fix something he'd broken. I told him not to. Some doors shouldn't be opened. I couldn't speak." She studied me for another moment, then whispered, "Do you still hear it?" The question hit me like a blade. My mouth went dry. "Hear what?" Her eyes softened with pity, or maybe fear. "The knocking." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She gave me a small nod, like she already knew. Then she said something that still makes my stomach twist every time I think about it. If she's still knocking, it means she's not done with you. Before I could ask what she meant, she was gone. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat by the window, the city lights stretching out below me like a dying constellation. The rain tapped softly against the glass, and somewhere beneath that steady rhythm, I heard it again. 3 soft knocks. Not from outside, not from the hallway, but from inside the walls. Thump, thump, thump. I pressed my ear against the cold plaster. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. "Please," I whispered. "Just leave me alone." And then, as if answering, I heard her voice. Soft. Familiar. The same broken whisper that had haunted me since childhood. "Ethan," I froze. My name. She'd never said my name before. "Ethan," she whispered again. Clearer this time. Closer. "It's so dark here." My vision blurred. I backed away, shaking my head. "You're not real," I said. "You're gone." "I set you free," the voice came again, almost gentle. "You did. But freedom is not peace." The air grew colder. Frost spread along the window pane. My breath turned white. I could feel her near me now, the faintest shift of air against my skin, like a small hand brushing my arm. I turned slowly. The lights flickered. She stood there in the reflection of the glass, not behind me. In the glass. Her eyes were hollow, glowing faintly, her face as still and pale as ash. But she was smiling, softly, almost lovingly. I spun around, but the room was empty. When I turned back to the window, she was gone. I don't remember the rest of that night. I must have passed out because I woke up on the floor, the early light spilling across the room. My apartment was freezing, though the heater was still running. My phone was dead. When I plugged it in, I saw a new photo saved in my gallery, one I didn't take. It showed the burned remains of my old house, the frame of the front door charred and broken. And in the center of the doorway stood the small wooden door from the hidden room, perfectly intact. Behind it, faint but visible, was a figure, small, childlike. Clara. I deleted the picture. 5 minutes later, it reappeared. I deleted it again. It came back. This time, the figure was closer. I stopped trying after the 5th time. I can't leave the apartment now. I've tried. Every time I pack my things, the key I found on my doorstep appears somewhere else. In my pocket, in my shoe, once even under my pillow. The first few times, I threw it out the window, but it always came back. I've stopped fighting it. Last night, I had another dream. This time there was no fog. No distance between us. Clara stood right in front of me, her small hand reaching toward mine. "You can end it," she said. "But you have to come back." "Back where?" I asked. "To where it started. When I woke up, there was dirt under my nails. It's after midnight now. The city outside my window is silent. I'm writing this because I need someone, anyone, to know the truth before I go. The key is sitting on my desk, gleaming faintly in the low light. I don't know where it leads anymore. Maybe nowhere. Maybe everywhere. But I can hear it now, louder than ever. The knocking. Not through the walls this time. From inside my head. Thump, thump, thump. I think I finally understand what my father meant when he said that some truths will ruin you. They don't just live in your mind. They eat through it, hollowing you out until you become part of the story yourself. Maybe that's what she wants. Maybe that's what she's always wanted. The knocking has stopped now. The silence feels heavier than sound. I can feel her presence beside me like a shadow pressed against my skin. She's waiting. I don't know what's going to happen when I turn that key. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Maybe I'll finally see her smile one last time. If anyone finds this, and if you ever hear 3 knocks in the dark, don't answer. Don't go toward the sound. Don't open the door. Because some doors aren't meant to be opened, and some sisters don't stay buried.